He stepped into the diner for nothing more than coffee. But the moment her daughter looked up from her coloring book and asked, "Why do you look like me?" time seemed to stop. Mira froze. Her hands trembled. That voice, so small, so honest, cut through 7 years of buried truth. Across the room stood the man she never thought she'd see again. On this Christmas morning, we welcome you to Mr. Ross' Story Trail. If stories of love, healing, and second chances speak to your heart, don't scroll past. Subscribe now and stay with us. To every woman watching today, I speak peace over your home, strength for your soul, and joy for your future. Now lean in. What would you do if your child unknowingly exposed the secret you've tried your whole life to protect? Because that's exactly where Mira's story begins. The morning always came too early for Mira. Her alarm buzzed at 4:45 a.m., long before the sun had anything to say. She moved quietly through the small trailer, careful not to wake her daughter. The floors creaked under her worn slippers, and the smell of yesterday's coffee still lingered in the air. She tied her apron at the waist, slipped her work shoes into a plastic bag to change into later, and poured herself a travel mug of instant brew, the bitter kind that kept her alert, not comforted. The town of Blue Ridge hadn't changed much in the last decade. The road still carried dust no matter the weather, and the old wooden sign at Ethel's place still leaned slightly to the left. Mira had worked here since she was 19. She never meant to stay this long, but life had a way of locking you in place when you weren't looking. Inside the diner, the air smelled of fried eggs, burnt toast, and old stories. Locals came not for the food, but for familiarity. The waitress with the tired smile and gentle voice. That's how most of them knew her. They didn't know the rest. No one did, except one. Mira's shift started at 6 a.m., but she always arrived by 5:30. It gave her a moment of silence before the breakfast rush. Time to gather herself, steady her thoughts, and breathe. Today her body moved on routine, but her mind felt heavier than usual. She glanced at her phone. A notification blinked across the screen. No school, teacher planning day. She closed her eyes. I forgot. There was no one to call, no one to help. Mira couldn't afford to take the day off, not when rent was overdue, and the pantry held more air than food. She texted her boss, I'll bring Araya with me. She'll be quiet, promise. The reply came back quick and short. Fine, booth 9. Don't let her wander. By 6:45, Mira was back home, gently nudging her daughter awake. Pumpkin, she whispered, stroking her curls. Come on, baby. You're coming to work with me today. Araya blinked up at her mother, yawned wide, and asked, Can I bring my crayons? Of course, even the glitter ones. Mira smiled softly. Even the glitter ones. At the diner, Araya sat tucked into booth 9. Crayons, coloring books, fruit slices, and her favorite orange sippy cup. She wore her purple unicorn hoodie and pink sneakers that had seen better days, but her smile could have lit the whole room. She was only 7, but sharp as a tack, always watching, always wondering. Mira kept glancing over between tables, checking to make sure she was still settled, still safe, still happy. It gave her a moment of light in the middle of serving black coffee and sausage patties. Your little girl? A customer asked. Mira nodded. Yes, sir. She's got your smile. Mira paused. Thank you, she replied, then walked away before emotion could betray her. Araya did have her smile, but her eyes, her cheekbones, that tilt of her chin when she was focused, those weren't Mira's. Not fully. Later, as the breakfast rush slowed, Mira sat down beside Araya during her 10-minute break. Finished your coloring? She asked. Nope. I'm drawing a cafe this time. A really big one, with lemon pie and pancakes that never burn. Mira chuckled. Sounds like a dream cafe. It's yours, Araya said. You work hard. You deserve your own place, Mama. The words hit Mira like a wave. She looked at her daughter, this tiny person with an enormous heart, and wondered how she got so lucky. Araya pulled out another sheet and began drawing a woman behind a counter and a man in a business suit standing beside her. Who's that? Mira asked, pointing to the man. Araya shrugged. Maybe it's someone nice, like a helper. Or maybe my dad. Mira felt her chest tighten. She stared at the sketch, unsure what to say. Mama. Yes, baby. Do you think my dad ever thinks about me? Mira didn't answer right away. Her hand rested gently over Araya's, steadying her own breath. I think anyone who ever met you would never forget you. Araya smiled. Then how come I've never met him? Mira turned her gaze toward the window, voice soft but firm. Sweetheart, some answers take time. To our wonderful viewers, if this story already has you feeling something deep, hope, sorrow, love, or even curiosity, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What would you tell a child asking about someone they've never met? Tap that like button if your heart's already with Mira and Araya. And remember, we read every word you write. The diner had settled into its late morning rhythm. Coffee cups clinked, the radio hummed softly with old R&B, and the fry cook's voice mumbled along to every tune. Mira refilled a creamer tray near the register when something caught her eye through the front window. A sleek black SUV pulled up. Clean, polished, and far too refined for a town where most cars had rust and personality. It idled for a moment before the door opened, and a man stepped out, adjusting the cuff of a charcoal hoodie as he shut the door behind him. He didn't belong here, that much was clear. Yet, he didn't seem lost either. His steps were quiet, purposeful, and when the bell above the diner door jingled, Mira didn't even look up. Not right away, but Araya did. She stared, not like a child seeing something shiny, but like someone recognizing something they'd only ever seen in dreams. He took a seat at the far end of the counter, 2 stools down from the window. Mira walked over, notebook in hand, ready to greet him like any other customer. But halfway through good morn, her voice stalled. He looked up. Their eyes met, and something invisible cracked between them. It lasted no more than a second, but in that second, Mira's entire foundation shifted. Her mouth went dry, her hands shook, her stomach turned. He didn't say her name, she didn't say his, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of confusion, a spark of familiarity. His brow furrowed, not in annoyance, but in memory. Mira forced herself to look away. Before she could gather her words, Araya's voice rang out across the diner. "Hey, Mama," she said. Mira turned, praying her daughter would stay seated. Stay quiet. But Araya didn't stop there. She stood up in the booth, pointed straight toward the man, and asked with innocent curiosity, "Why do you look like me?" The diner went silent. Even the radio seemed to lower itself. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations cut short. A breathless hush settled into every corner. Mira's chest tightened. Her eyes flicked to Araya, her baby, standing with wonder in her voice and truth in her face. Then she turned to the man and saw the shift in his expression, the widening of his eyes, the slight parting of his lips, the quiet collapse of certainty in his posture. He wasn't just staring at the girl. He was seeing something he didn't expect, something that made too much sense, too fast. Mira walked briskly to booth 9, her voice low and trembling. "Araya, sit down, baby." "But Mama..." "Now." Araya sank into her seat, eyes still fixed on the man. Mira knelt beside her and tucked a loose braid behind her ear. "He's just a customer. Be polite, okay? But I know, sweetie. We'll talk later." Araya nodded, quietly nibbling a grape as Mira stood up and faced the counter again. The man was still watching, not staring, not rude, just trying to process what his mind had already told him. Mira approached him again, slower this time. "Coffee?" she asked, voice hoarse. He nodded once. "Black, please." She poured from the pot, her hand barely steady. He took the mug, but didn't lift it to his lips. Instead, he said softly, "Her name is Araya." Mira didn't answer. Not yes, not no, nothing. He looked down at the steam rising from his cup. "I'm not here to cause problems," he added. "I didn't even know this town existed until today." Mira crossed her arms. "What are you doing here, Kazian?" That name. She hadn't spoken it in 7 years. He looked up sharply. His name and her voice sounded like memory and heartache all at once. "I had a meeting in Macon," he said. "Driver got hungry. I asked for someplace quiet." He gave a dry, almost bitter laugh. "Guess I found it." She didn't smile. He leaned forward. "Is she?" "Don't," she whispered. "Not here." They stared at each other, both suddenly aware of the space between them, small in distance, heavy in history. Kazian looked back toward the booth where Araya sat watching them. "She's bright," he said softly. "Sharp eyes." Mira nodded, lips tight. "She's my whole world." After a moment, Mira turned and walked away. She moved through the diner like a ghost, taking orders, delivering plates, refilling cups, but her mind was somewhere else. Or rather, with someone else. Kazian Thorne, the man she once gave her heart to. The man she tried so hard to forget. The man her daughter now questioned with nothing but truth in her voice. Back in booth 9, Aria colored quietly, but her eyes kept drifting toward the man with the kind face and familiar features. She leaned over to Mira as she dropped off a plate of pancakes. "Is he my dad?" Mira blinked hard. "Eat your food, baby." "But Mama," I said, "eat." Mira stepped outside during her second break and stood by the back door, clutching her arms to her chest. The cold morning air bit at her skin, but she welcomed it. Anything to wake her from whatever this was. She didn't expect him to follow, but he did. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "I didn't know," he said. "I tried to tell you," she replied. Kazian frowned. "I never got a call. I left messages. I sent letters. I never saw any of them." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Mira looked at him. Really looked. "Why are you here, Kazian?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked the question she'd been running from since breakfast. "Is she mine?" Mira's voice caught in her throat. Tears stung at the edge of her lashes, but she refused to let them fall. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just turned, walked back inside, and left the door open behind her. The bell above the door jingled again as Kazian stepped out of the diner and into the crisp Georgia air. Mira didn't look back as she swept under booth 4, cleaning up after a breakfast. Regular who always left exact change and crumbs the size of quarters. She needed space. She needed answers. She needed time, but time wasn't something you could ask for when the past walked through. Your door wearing old cologne and questions you never wanted to answer. Back at booth 9, Araya leaned across the table, arms folded under her chin. "Mama's mad," she whispered to herself. "But I'm not." She looked toward the counter again. The man was gone. She frowned, then started scribbling a new drawing. This time, it wasn't pancakes or fairy tale castles. It was a man with brown skin, soft curls, and gentle eyes. He had her note. 10 minutes later, Mira stepped outside for air again. This time, Kazian wasn't at the back door. He was standing beside the SUV, leaning against it like he'd forgotten how to leave. She didn't want to walk toward him, but her legs moved anyway. "You didn't recognize me, did you?" he asked. "I recognized you the second you looked up," she said. "That's what scared me." He let out a breath. "I never got those messages, Mira. Not one. I didn't know you were trying to reach me." She crossed her arms, face unreadable. "I didn't send them to you directly. I gave them to Denny. He said you'd moved on, said you weren't looking for anything serious." Kazian's jaw clenched. Denny lied. I figured that out about 5 years too late. There was silence, thick between them. "I want to know her," he said softly. "She's not a project or an obligation." "I didn't say she was. I'm just asking for a chance." Mira hesitated. Her heart pounded in her chest. "She's never even asked for a father," she whispered. She just asked where her smile came from. Kazian's eyes flicked up, the weight in his expression unmistakable. "I saw it," he said. "I saw it the second she looked at me." They stood there for a moment. Strangers. Not quite. But no longer what they were. Finally, Mira pulled a folded napkin from her apron pocket. "I wrote my number. If you want to talk, really talk, wait until after 5. I have another shift later tonight." He took it gently. "I'll wait." And just like that, she turned and walked away again, this time not out of fear, but because if she stayed even 1 second longer, her resolve might crack. Meanwhile, inside the diner, Araya watched through the window. She didn't need to hear the words. She just knew. Something big was happening, and somehow she was part of it. The bell above the door jingled again as Kazian stepped out of the diner and into the crisp Georgia air. Mira didn't look back as she swept under booth 4, cleaning up after a breakfast. Regular who always left exact change in crumbs the size of quarters. She needed space. She needed answers. She needed time. But time wasn't something you could ask for when the past walked through. Your door wearing old cologne and questions you never wanted to answer. Back at booth 9, Araya leaned across the table, arms folded under her chin. "Mama's mad," she whispered to herself. "But I'm not." She looked toward the counter again. The man was gone. She frowned, then started scribbling a new drawing. This time, it wasn't pancakes or fairy tale castles. It was a man with brown skin, soft curls, and gentle eyes. He had her note. 10 minutes later, Mira stepped outside for air again. This time, Kazian wasn't at the back door. He was standing beside the SUV, leaning against it like he'd forgotten how to leave. She didn't want to walk toward him, but her legs moved anyway. "You didn't recognize me, did you?" he asked. "I recognized you the second you looked up," she said. "That's what scared me." He let out a breath. "I never got those messages, Mira. Not one. I didn't know you were trying to reach me." She crossed her arms, face unreadable. "I didn't send them to you directly. I gave them to Denny. He said you'd moved on, said you weren't looking for anything serious." Kazian's jaw clenched. Denny lied. "I figured that out about 5 years too late." There was silence, thick between them. "I want to know her," he said softly. "She's not a project, or an obligation. I didn't say she was. I'm just asking for a chance." Mira hesitated. Her heart pounded in her chest. "She's never even asked for a father," she whispered. She just asked where her smile came from. Kazian's eyes flicked up, the weight in his expression unmistakable. "I saw it," he said. "I saw it the second she looked at me." They stood there for a moment. Strangers, not quite, but no longer what they were. Finally, Mira pulled a folded napkin from her apron pocket. "I wrote my number. If you want to talk, really talk, wait until after 5. I have another shift later tonight." He took it gently. "I'll wait." And just like that, she turned and walked away again, this time not out of fear, but because if she stayed even 1 second longer, her resolve might crack. Meanwhile, inside the diner, Araya watched through the window. She didn't need to hear the words. She just knew something big was happening, and somehow she was part of it. The test was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Kazian had offered to cover the cost privately. No court order, no lawyers. Just a quiet visit to a clinic in Atlanta. No fuss, no media, no headlines. Mira agreed, but she didn't speak much the day she drove there. Araya sat in the back seat with a stuffed giraffe and a backpack full of crayons. "Where are we going again?" she asked. "Just to meet someone," Mira answered. "It won't take long." Kazian met them in the lobby, dressed in jeans and a simple gray tee. No security, no driver, just him. He knelt to Araya's level. "Hey, superstar," he said gently. "You remember me?" Araya nodded. "You're the man from the diner." "That's right. Is it okay if we talk a bit today?" She looked up at her mom, who gave a slow nod. Araya shrugged. "Okay. But only if there's juice later." Kazian smiled. "Deal." The clinic visit was brief. A cheek swab for both of them. No tears. No drama. Araya was more curious than anything. "Do I get a sticker?" The nurse chuckled and handed her one with a smiling sun. "Why did he do that?" Araya asked on the way out. Mira glanced in the mirror. "Just checking something. About me." "Yes, baby. About you." They stopped at a bookstore cafe afterward, one Araya had never been to but fell in love with immediately. Books lined the walls, and the cafe in the corner smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. Kazian ordered 3 hot chocolates, one with extra whipped cream for Araya, and joined them at a table near the back, away from curious glances. "Can I show you what I'm reading?" Araya asked him. "I'd love that." She pulled out a picture book and began flipping through pages, explaining every character and why they mattered. Kazian listened, fully present. No phone, no watch checking, just her. Mira sat nearby watching, arms folded, heart unsure. But something softened in her expression when she heard Araya laugh. Over the next few days, something shifted. Kazian texted, not to Mira, but to ask about Araya, how she was doing, what she liked, her favorite bedtime story. One night, he sent a message. "Does she still like puzzles?" Mira replied, after a pause. She never stopped. The next morning, a package arrived at the diner. A wooden puzzle map of the U.S., handcrafted, no brand tag, just a note. Every piece matters. Just like she does. Mira tucked it into her bag that night and brought it home. Araya gasped. "Did you buy this, Mama?" "No, baby." "Who did?" Mira hesitated. "A friend." The following Saturday, Kazian asked if he could take Araya to a puppet show at the town library. "I'll stay the whole time," he said to Mira. "If she gets uncomfortable, we leave." Mira agreed, cautiously. She followed in her own car, sitting quietly in the back row of the room. But Araya didn't need her. She sat beside Kazian, completely at ease. She whispered questions in his ear, giggled at the silly voices, and clapped when the curtains closed. Afterward, she asked, "Can we come back next week?" Kazian looked at Mira. Mira nodded. "Yes, baby," she said. "You can." On the ride home, Araya turned to her mother with a thoughtful look. "Mama." "Yes? Is he your friend?" Mira almost laughed. "What does that mean?" "You know, like someone you used to kiss." Mira blinked, thrown off balance. "Where did you hear that?" "I saw a movie once. The girl said that about her mom and her dad." Mira exhaled, her voice gentler now. "He's someone I knew a long time ago." Araya leaned back. "I like his laugh. It sounds warm." That night, after Araya was asleep, Mira sat at the edge of her bed and stared at her phone. A message came through at 9:12 p.m. "Kazian, she's amazing. I'm still trying to understand how I missed all of this." "Mira, you didn't miss her. Someone made sure you didn't know." There was a long pause. Then, "Kazian, I don't want to be a stranger again. Ever." Mira stared at the screen, then turned off the light and sat in the silence, because part of her wanted to believe him, but belief had cost her once before. To all our watchers, especially the mothers out there, have you ever guarded your heart so tightly, not because you didn't feel love, but because you couldn't risk losing peace? Drop a message in the comments if you've ever wrestled with hope and hesitation at the same time. Like this story if you believe children have a way of pulling adults toward truth. The air outside the diner that evening smelled faintly of sugar and grease. The sun had long dipped beneath the trees, and the warm yellow light from inside flickered against the window panes like a memory that wouldn't leave. Mira stepped out with her arms folded across her chest, her apron wrinkled, her hair pinned back. The weight of a double shift clung to her bones, but she stayed, leaning against the side wall beneath a flickering porch light. Kazian was waiting, not leaning, not pacing, just sitting on the bench with 2 styrofoam cups of peach cobbler and a brown paper bag of forks. "I didn't know if you'd come out," he said. "I told you I get off at 10. I also remember you don't like cold dessert." She sat beside him slowly. "Not too close, but not far." He handed her a cup and a plastic fork. They ate in silence at first, each bite a quiet bridge. After a few minutes, he said softly, "I used to drive past here." She turned toward him, curious. "After you left Atlanta, I didn't know where you went, but when business started picking up, look out the window sometimes. Wonder if I'd see you on the street, in a bookstore, anywhere." Mira scooped another bite, then replied, "I used to do the same. Wonder where you ended up, what became of your plans." His voice lowered. "You were the story I never finished reading." Mira's heart thudded, not from flattery, from memory. She looked down at her lap. "And you were the dream I stopped believing in." He turned to face her. "Do you still write?" She shook her head. "No time. You used to say stories kept you sane." She laughed, but not with joy. "Now survival keeps me busy." He leaned back against the bench. "You're still the same. I'm not." He looked at her then, really looked. "No. You're stronger now. There's a fire in you, but it's tired." She didn't speak. Her eyes glistened in the low light. "Can I ask something honest?" He continued. She gave a tiny nod. "If the test confirms she's mine, what does that mean for us, for her?" Mira's voice came quiet, but clear. "It means she'll finally know where she came from. But it doesn't mean I'm handing her over. I don't care how much money you have." Kazian nodded. "I'm not here to buy a family." "Good. Because I'm not for sale." Another pause. Then he asked what had been sitting beneath all their words. "Did you hate me?" Mira exhaled. "No. I hated how easily I believed Denny. I hated how fast silence felt final. But no, I never hated you." He sat with that for a moment. "I never forgot you," he said. "Not even once." She turned toward him again, slowly. "I used to pray you'd call. Then I prayed I'd forget you." He moved just slightly closer, not to invade her space, but to offer something safer. "I want to make things right. Not overnight, not by force, just by showing up. If you'll let me." Mira didn't respond immediately. Her mind was loud with memories, fears, and unspoken wishes. But then, she leaned forward. Their lips met, soft, slow, uncertain at first. It wasn't a grand declaration. It was a beginning. When they pulled back, neither of them said anything. And maybe they didn't have to. Some moments didn't need language. Just honesty. Just time. Later that night, as Mira lay in bed with Araya snuggled against her side, her daughter mumbled in her sleep, "I like the way he talks to you." Mira smiled faintly. "Me too, baby," she whispered. "Me too." The envelope arrived on a Wednesday. It came by courier, no return address, just Mira's name typed neatly on the front. She stood in the kitchen, hands trembling, staring at the sealed flap like it might speak first. Araya was playing in her room, humming to herself. Mira didn't open it right away. She placed it on the counter, washed the dishes, swept the floor, reheated leftover spaghetti. It wasn't until Araya was asleep, curled beneath her brave girl's rule blanket, that Mira finally sat down at the table, opened the envelope, and read the single page inside. She read it once, then again, then a third time. She didn't cry. She just let the truth sit beside her in the quiet. The next day, she called him. "I got the results," she said. A pause. "Okay," he replied. "And she's yours." Kasian didn't respond for a long beat, but Mira could hear his breath catch. A sound between relief and guilt. "I'd like to come see her," he said. Mira closed her eyes. "I know." They met at the park near her place, a small clearing with a swing set, 2 benches, and an old jungle gym with peeling paint. Araya ran ahead with her sparkly sneakers flashing in the sunlight. Mira stood beside Kasian as he watched his daughter climb, leap, and laugh. "She's fearless," he said. "She's cautious," Mira corrected, "but she trusts her feet." "That's still brave." They watched in silence for a while before Araya called out, "Watch this, Mr. Kasian." He smiled. "I'm watching." She jumped off the last step, landing with both feet and raising her hands in triumph. "I've never seen her that happy with anyone else," he said quietly. "She's never had the chance." Later, as they sat on the bench sharing juice boxes and snacks, Araya looked up between bites of apple. "Now that we know you're my dad, do I have to move to a big house?" Mira laughed under her breath. "No, baby, that's not how it works." Kasian leaned in. "You stay with Mama. I'm just going to be around more. If that's okay." Araya nodded. "Can we still read books?" "Every time you let me." That evening, after dropping Araya off at her friend's house, Mira and Kasian walked through the local market. It was a small-town version of a city plaza. Food trucks, folding tables, live music playing from a speaker tied to a tree. They stopped near a bench where a man was selling homemade candles. "Pick one," Kasian said. Mira raised a brow. "What for?" He shrugged. "Just something small, a reminder." She looked through the labels, found one called Grace. It smelled like vanilla and old prayer books. She didn't say anything, just handed it to the man, and Kasian paid. Back in her car, Mira sat for a moment before starting the engine. "He's not who I thought he'd be," she whispered to herself. The bitterness she'd prepared all these years didn't quite fit anymore. But the fear, that still lingered. Not fear of him, fear of falling again, of hoping again, of trusting that this time it wouldn't all collapse. That night, Mira prayed quietly over her daughter. She didn't ask for miracles, just for peace, just for time, just for the strength to walk slowly, because love, when it returned this way, needed space to breathe. Weeks passed. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic speeches, just consistency. Kasian showed up every Saturday with a new book in hand, sometimes a puzzle, sometimes a simple pack of colored pens because he remembered Araya said her blue one ran out. They read together on the porch. He listened to her talk about clouds and spelling bees and why she wanted to learn how to make real lemonade, not the powdered kind. Mira watched from the kitchen window. She wanted to believe it wasn't temporary. She wanted to believe he wasn't just trying to correct a mistake. But belief, for her, was a slow climb. One Sunday morning, over pancakes and quiet jazz playing in the background, Kasian finally asked the question that had been lingering between them. "Would you ever consider coming to Atlanta?" Mira didn't respond right away. She reached for the syrup, poured a little over Araya's plate, then looked at him. "I'm not interested in living in anyone's shadow, or being someone's project. I've worked too hard to stand on my own." Kasian nodded. "I'm not asking you to give anything up. I'm asking if you'd let me build something with you." She tilted her head slightly. "What does that look like to you?" He took a breath. "You said once you dreamed of a cafe. One that was warm, with real food, and books for kids who don't feel seen. What if that wasn't just a dream anymore? Mira stared at him, her fork frozen above her plate. You're offering me charity? I'm offering you respect, quiet support, no strings. You choose the space, the design, the name. I'll fund it. Not because I want credit, but because I want to see you fly. Later that night, Mira sat at her kitchen table long after Araya had gone to sleep. She stared at a blank sheet of paper. Then she wrote one word at the top, rise. She underlined it. Then again. Then started sketching the outline of her dream cafe, not as fantasy, but as blueprint. The next morning, she called Kazian. I'll move, she said, but not to your mansion, and not because I need saving. I'm doing this because my daughter deserves more, and so do I. He didn't try to convince her. He just said, I'll be ready when you are. Moving day wasn't extravagant. A small U-Haul, 2 helping hands from her church family, and Araya bouncing around with joy as she packed up her picture books and glitter markers. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the heart of Atlanta, close to schools, close to parks, and walking distance from the location Mira chose for the cafe. Kazian had already secured the lease, under her name. Everything else, she would build from scratch. Their first dinner in the new apartment was peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices on the floor. No furniture yet, but plenty of laughter. And that, Mira thought, was a solid beginning. Mira stared at the paper again, though the words hadn't changed. She already told him. He already knew. But somehow, seeing the official results typed on a page felt different, more permanent, as if the past 7 years had been quiet thunder, and now, finally, the sound had reached her. Her daughter had a father, and not just any man. The man who once whispered dreams under streetlights and held her hand like it was sacred. The man who now stood outside her door with a bag of groceries in one hand and a second chance in the other. Araya was sitting on the living room floor in her new Atlanta apartment, arranging her favorite books into color-coded stacks. Kazian had stopped by that afternoon, just for a few minutes, he said, to drop off muffins, to ask how her first week at the new school had gone. But he hadn't left yet. Mira handed him a glass of water and sat on the edge of the couch. She's adjusting, she said quietly. A little overwhelmed, but she won't admit it. He glanced toward Araya. She's trying to make you proud. She already does. They both watched her for a moment, small and determined in a room filled with boxes. Then he spoke. I'm grateful. For what? For the chance. For her. For you. Letting me in, even if it's still hard. Mira looked at him, something unreadable in her eyes. It is hard, she admitted, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Later that night, after Kazian left and Araya was asleep, Mira sat at the small dining table with her hands folded under her chin. She thought about everything that had changed in just a few weeks. New home, new school, new beginnings, and yet her fears had followed her. Would this last? Could it? Would Kazian stay if the road wasn't easy? The next morning, they met again at the cafe building, the one she'd chosen for her business. It was still empty, still raw. The walls were bare, the windows dusty, the floors worn. But Mira saw beauty in it. She saw potential, a place to build something that belonged to her, not borrowed, not temporary. I want shelves over there, she said, pointing. Books for kids, local writers, and a mural across that wall. Something bold, something honest. He nodded. What else? A small stage, poetry readings, story nights. Kazian pulled a folded sheet from his jacket. It was a rough sketch of a layout. Had a designer friend draw this up based on what you mentioned. You don't have to use it. Mira scanned it, then looked up. It's good. It's yours. They sat on the window ledge, sunlight filtering in through streaked glass. Mira turned to him. I need to ask you something real. Always. If this gets hard, if I get scared again, will you still be here? His eyes didn't shift. Yes, that's easy to say. It's harder to prove, but I'm here to do both. The next evening, Araya and Mira sat cross-legged on the floor, sharing a bowl of popcorn. Mama, Araya asked, crumbs on her chin. Yes, love. I know you're scared. Mira blinked. Scared of what? That everything's changing. Mira reached over, gently wiping her daughter's face. Some change is good, she said softly. Araya tilted her head. I think we both deserve a happy ending. Mira's heart twisted at her words. And if this is ours, Aria continued, we should say yes before it walks away. To the women listening, the ones who carry fear alongside faith, have you ever stood at the edge of something good but hesitated to trust it? Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever had to choose courage over comfort. Like this video, if you believe healing can live on the other side of hard choices. The next morning, Mira woke early, not from her alarm but from stillness. The kind of stillness that follows nights spent staring at the ceiling, weighing every what if and every could be. She walked into the kitchen, barefoot, her robe tied loosely, and poured herself a cup of black coffee. It was quiet, peaceful, but not empty. For once, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like permission. Later that afternoon, she met Kazien at the cafe site again. The front doors were propped open, letting in warm air and faint street sounds from the city outside. Mira stepped inside slowly, taking it all in again. The floor that needed refinishing, the windows that needed cleaning, the future that needed a decision. Kazien stood near the back, speaking with the contractor. When he saw her, he gave a small nod, then excused himself and walked over. She didn't wait for him to speak. I'm doing this. He paused. The cafe. Everything. His shoulders relaxed, but she wasn't finished. I'm saying yes to a new chapter, but not because I need someone to hold my hand through it. I'm saying yes because I want to build something that feels like mine, and if you meant to be part of that, it'll show up in your consistency, not your promises. Kazien looked her in the eyes. That's more than fair. I'm not asking you to agree with everything I do. I'm asking you to respect the pace I need. I do. She nodded, quietly steady. And I'm not moving forward just because Araya wants this. I'm doing it because I want it too. They walked the empty floor together, not as strangers returning, but as something new forming, brick by brick, not breathless or rushed. Mira pointed to the back corner. I want a reading nook there, a big chair, a soft rug, somewhere kids can listen to stories and feel seen. Done, he said. She glanced at him. You don't have to agree to everything I say. I'm not agreeing. I'm investing. She smiled, small but real. That evening, the three of them had dinner at a neighborhood soul food spot. Nothing fancy, just good food and warm lighting. Araya dipped her biscuit in honey and announced mid-bite, I'm glad we moved here. Mira raised an eyebrow. You miss your friends back home? I do, Araya replied, but I think we'll make new ones. And maybe this is the beginning of something better. Kazien looked across the table at Mira. She met his eyes, and for once, didn't look away. Maybe it is, she said. Later that night, after Araya was tucked in and the apartment lights were low, Mira stood at the balcony alone, watching the city blink in the distance. Kazien stepped outside quietly. You good? He asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, when I left Atlanta 7 years ago, I thought I was walking away from failure, but maybe I was walking toward foundation. He leaned beside her. You built something beautiful. Mira looked at him, voice firm. I'm not starting over. I'm continuing, with or without you. His reply was soft. I hope it's with me. Opening day came on a Friday. The cafe sign hadn't arrived yet, so Mira wrote the name in thick chalk across. A sandwich board just outside the door. Rise Cafe. Coffee, stories, courage. The grand opening wasn't announced. There were no balloons, no speeches, just hand-printed flyers posted around the block, a soft open invite on the window, and a note that read, Come inside. Come as you are. At 7:30 a.m., the doorbell chimed. The first customer was an older woman from the neighborhood who asked for black tea and sat by the window, knitting slowly between sips. By 9, 3 mothers from the school across the street showed up with toddlers. By noon, the place was full. The coffee machine hissed, soft music played from a speaker Mira hid behind the counter, and a boy stood near the back, reading out loud from a picture book while his sister clapped at every page turn. It wasn't flashy. It was alive. Mira stood behind the counter, apron dusted with flour and cinnamon. She moved with quiet focus, but there was light in her expression, the kind that came from finally stepping into a space she built on her own terms. Kazien walked in around 1:15, not to check in, not to hover, just to see her. He waited in line like everyone else. When he got to the counter, he smiled. I'll take whatever you recommend. She passed him a warm cup with a little label that read, Be still. You're allowed to breathe now. He glanced at the message. "Did you write this?" She nodded. He looked down, then back up. "You wrote it for me?" "I wrote it for myself," she said. That evening, after locking up, Mira found Araya sitting in the reading corner, with her shoes off, a cup of cocoa in hand, and 2 books stacked on her lap. "How was your first day as cafe boss?" Araya asked. Mira ruffled her curls. "Busy, wonderful, tiring. Like motherhood?" "Exactly like that." They laughed quietly. Araya looked around the empty cafe, eyes glowing. "This feels like home." "It is home," Mira replied. "One we made." Later that weekend, Mira invited Kasian over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just rice, stew, and a fresh loaf of bread she'd picked up from a bakery down the street. After the meal, they sat on the floor, legs stretched out, music playing low. Kasian turned to her. "You're not the same woman I knew 7 years ago." She smiled. "Thank God." "I liked her," he said. "But this version of you, she doesn't need anyone, and somehow that makes me want to stay even more." Mira reached over, took his hand. "Just don't mistake strength for distance. I'm still learning how to let someone in. I've got time." That night, when Araya asked Mira to read her a bedtime story, she chose one. From the cafe shelf, a story about a girl who planted a seed and waited. "It didn't grow right away," Araya said, halfway through. She thought it was dead. Mira nodded. "But sometimes, the strongest roots grow in silence." They looked at each other for a moment, mother and daughter, teacher and student, mirror and reflection. Then Araya whispered, "We're growing now, right?" Mira kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby, we are." The Rise Cafe had only been open for 6 weeks, but already the baristas knew the regulars by name. The little boy who loved blueberry muffins but always picked off the blueberries. The woman who brought in handwritten poetry on Mondays and read them aloud over hot ginger tea. The older couple who held hands like they were still on their first date. And Mira? She stood behind the counter, apron smudged with flour, curls pulled into a loose bun, taking it all in. The sound of laughter, the smell of cinnamon, the shelf of donated books near the window. The dream she thought she buried had become the place where others now came to breathe. Kasian didn't make a show of being involved. He didn't hover or take credit, but on the mornings Mira opened early, he'd swing by before work, sometimes to fix a wobbly table, sometimes to refill the tea bin, sometimes just to sit quietly in the corner with a cup of black coffee and watch her build. One morning, she brought him a slice of banana bread and sat across from him. "You know," she said, "I used to think love had to be dramatic, flashy, full of declarations." He looked up from his cup. "And now? Now I think love is making sure the mop bucket isn't empty at the end of a long day." He grinned. Their relationship didn't rush forward. It moved like the sunrise. Steady, quiet. Sure, Fridays became family dinner night. Sometimes takeout on the couch. Sometimes spaghetti with too much garlic bread. Sometimes peanut butter toast with apple slices because Mira had no energy left, and no one complained. Araya called it the happy table. Even when the food was late. Even when someone forgot the napkins. Even when all they did was laugh and eat on paper plates while Kasian tried, and failed, to braid her hair. One Sunday morning, Mira stood in the kitchen flipping pancakes while Araya danced to old-school music playing from a speaker. "Not too crispy, Mama." Araya shouted, I know." From the hallway, Kasian appeared with sleep in his eyes and a confused look on his face. "I thought the rule was pancakes on Saturdays." Mira handed him a mug of coffee. "We're breaking rules today." "Good," he said, "because I forgot what day it was anyway." On a rare Thursday evening, they shared dinner under soft lights at the back of the cafe after closing. No customers, just the clink of forks, the hum of a playlist, and quiet conversation. Mira leaned back in her chair. "You know what scares me?" she asked. "What?" "That I could actually be happy." Kasian reached across the table, brushed her fingertips with his. "You don't have to run from peace. It's allowed to stay." At bedtime that same night, Araya pulled Mira close and whispered, "This feels like a forever family." Mira held her longer than usual, because it did. It really did. To every woman listening who's ever rebuilt herself one quiet step at a time, this part of the story is for you. Drop a star in the comments if you know what it feels like to finally breathe easy. Like if you believe healing can be soft, steady, and still real. The auditorium was packed. parents stood shoulder to shoulder in the aisles, phones raised, tissues clutched, hearts full. Mira sat in the third row, wearing a soft blue dress and holding tightly to Kazian's hand. Their fingers were laced, but their grip said more than words could. On stage, a girl stepped up to the podium, tall, poised, and glowing with confidence. Araya, 17, valedictorian. She adjusted the mic, took a breath, smiled. When I was little, she began, I asked my mom a lot of questions. Most of them didn't have easy answers. One day, I asked a man in a diner why he looked like me. Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. I didn't know it then, but that question changed everything. She paused, eyes finding her parents in the crowd. My mother taught me how to survive. She taught me how to lead with grace, even when things were hard. She didn't just raise me. She raised herself, too. A quiet tear traced Mira's cheek. My father taught me how to stay grounded while dreaming big. He didn't show up with noise. He showed up with presence. And he stayed. Araya swallowed, her voice steady. Together they taught me that family isn't perfect, but it's real. It's honest, and it's worth the work. She glanced down at her speech, then looked up again. And if I've learned anything, it's that sometimes it only takes one question to change everything. In the crowd, Kazian squeezed Mira's hand gently. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The chapter that began with uncertainty had become a legacy built on truth, love, and time. And they were all still standing, together,